Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. Welcome to the Into podcast. Great to have you guys on today. And today joined with Rodney Phelps over there in Illinois and Derek Cottrill in Northwest Missouri. How are you guys?
Morning, Nick.
Good morning.
Well, guys, I thought we'd start with just kind of a geographic update. You know, for you guys may not be as much planting progress, but crop progress, where we're at, activity, et cetera, crop stage. I don't know if you maybe want to start that, Derek.
Yeah, as far as planting progress goes, I mean, corn is basically same as done, except for what could potentially be getting replanted. Beans are still a little bit to go in, but planting overall, I'd say is over 80% done for all of Northwest Missouri. We had some historical rainfall events in certain areas over the past week, and so that slowed things down, but maybe caused some crusting issues, things like that here in spots. But the guys are back rolling now, and crops are moving fairly slow. The corn's going to take off here with the heat that we finally started getting, but things were moving slow because of the cooler weather. But most of the corn I'm seeing is anywhere from, I'd say the majority V4 to V6. So it really is getting to some critical stages to get the weeds out of there. And now looking into that top dress timing and some stress mitigation is going to become pretty important. As far as beans go, I'd say the majority I'm seeing are still in the V1 to V3. They've been kind of just creeping along real slow. I think a lot of that has to do with the weather conditions that we've had, but they'll get going here. They're just kind of in that phase where it seems like they set in the same stage for a week or two. But now that we got heat, we got moisture in the ground, beans will start getting along here pretty good too. And again, critical timing to get both crops clean in terms of weeds and things like that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Rodney?
Yeah, so planning for us, I would say all intents purposes is done. There's your errant field here and there, but for most part is done. Most of the crop is germinated and up, and we have some corn approaching that V3 to V4 stage. Beans are like Derek said, are a little slower, but with the heat, they're really coming on. And I would have to say we've got some very good looking crop at this stage of the game. And so we're in post application on a lot of corn, and we'll be addressing some top dress, side dress stuff here very, very shortly.
Appreciate that, guys. I guess for me, I'm the one that's behind the 8 ball a little bit. My geography, like general, varies west to east, but just if I had to put a general number on it, I'd say we're probably 80% planted, probably a little bit higher on corn and 80 or maybe a little less on beans. But this next 7 to 10 day stretch will finish this up. It sure looks like with no rain in the forecast. Still some replant potentially going to happen. We've had some already happen, but on the late April stuff, some more potentially going to happen on some stuff that got ponded there in early May. As far as stages, obviously we're at a potpourri of stages. You know, probably the earliest is at V7. Probably got somebody in the river bottom that's maybe got V8, but V7 all the way down to spiking corn to corn that's still yet to get planted. Soybeans is the same way. I mean, it's a potpourri, but last week on Friday, so been the 22nd of May, I found the first flowers on soybeans. That was some March planted 3.7s, and I don't know that I've ever seen flowers in May before, but at least it was the first time that early, anyways, for me. And then obviously beans still getting put in the ground, so we're all over the place. One thing I would say is, yeah, be sure if you're out spraying beans, just understand if you're at R1 or not, because you sure don't want to burn the heck out of them if they're at that stage. With that said, guys, there's kind of a whole potpourri of topics that we could talk about. And I guess what I thought is, the weed control's been the hot topic. I know Derek and I are a little different situation than what Rodney is. We've had plenty of messes out there with our wet spring and trying to clean things up. And so I thought we would start out with on the weed control, what if our post app didn't work? We're going after some big weeds. We didn't totally clean them off. What do we do in those situations? And Derek, you can jump in however you want, wherever you want. But I guess just to start that topic off, I will just say I've heard some talk recently on resistance. I've heard guys say, well, I'm hearing resistance is building because this product didn't work or that product didn't work. And I guess the one thing I would be cautious, there is plenty of resistance out there, no doubt. We know there's plenty of it. And there continues to be more and more, especially on the HPPD side for us, where we were kind of isolated in Missouri. It seems like it's moving. But I will say when we're going after 12-inch tall water hemp, it's not exactly on label. And so some of the talk of resistance in a spring like this really stirs around the fact that we're just going after weeds that are way too big to start with. So just, I guess I'm just saying that to keep that in mind. You may have resistance, but you also may just be going after weeds that are way too big. And when you start thinking about that, this spring, we did a really good job last fall of putting fall herbicide down. And then we had a wet spring, and typically you get planted early. Some guys are able to just plant right into that and then spray it sometime after they plant or after it comes up. But we had a spring where we got really wet. And so those fall apps are not designed to hold water hemp back. I think we've mentioned that before on a previous podcast. And so in some situations, that stuff got out of control. And I just want us all to remember that, we're putting a lot of pressure on these post herbicides when we let the water hemp come up. So, I mean, one way I think about it is if you have a million water hemp plants per acre and you control 90% of them, which 90% would be pretty decent control out of a post app, it's going to look a lot different than when you have 10 water hemp plants per acre and you control 90% of them. We're just putting a lot of pressure and they're not built to have that kind of pressure put on them. So it really comes back to having to have a really, really proactive plan. And in a tough spring like this, like I know that was the hand we were dealt, but it's just another example of the need to have a really proactive residual plan in place. And Derek, that might be a good place to get you involved here on this discussion. I don't know if you want to make some comments on that.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I'd say over the last 2 weeks, that's been my main field calls have been something around weed control, whether or not the growers determining do I need to spray now or why didn't I kill these weeds, that type of thing. And honestly, what I'm a little bit surprised with all the rainfall events and stuff that we had, the residuals are actually holding on. A lot of the weed issues that I'm seeing out there are things that we never got burnt down from the beginning during our burn down application. Our post apps just started going on in earnest here over this week because of that rainfall. So we're a little late getting in. So I got weeds out there that have already been dinged up, and it is even more difficult to kill a weed that's already been hit once, type deal. And so we're going to have to get pretty aggressive um, as possible with our burn down mixes on this post side. But also, the other thing I'm concerned about is we're so far from canopy still, especially in soybeans. And so, if we're going out there with our post pass now and we got unifoliate to V1 beans, even V3 beans, we're so far from canopy that, I'm encouraging guys to consider bumping up whatever your residual you're using on the post side. Because, like I said earlier, this is our critical timing to stay ahead of weeds. And a lot of people aren't right now, and there's a lot of different reasons, a lot of applications that went on around that April 9th timeframe, it seems like. I think a lot of it was weather induced, just didn't get some of the weeds burned down. And so they're still out there, they're still alive. And so we're not only trying to lay our residual, we're trying to kill weeds that have already been hit once type deal. But this is kind of our second chance, I guess, if you would, to stay ahead of weeds, and I would highly consider bumping up that residual rate if possible, if the label allows, just because we're not going to be able to rely on canopy to keep the weeds back for a while.
Great points, Derek. Rodney, I don't know if you want to jump in and say, I know you're in a different situation where things look a little better. If you want to maybe mention why.
Yeah, so we had a good burn down run. Mother Nature allowed us to get in timely and get a good heavy burn down, plus some residuals, and so we didn't have near the rain that you guys did, and so it didn't wash out as quick and lose some of the effectiveness that potentially your guys did. Um, and so now we're getting in, we're coming into post spray and second pass on our corn, and we don't get me wrong, we do have some escapes, and we do have some oops, but not to the degree where we're dealing with tall weeds, and we missed them. So our but caution to the wind that make sure on this post trip that we have heavy residuals, because it is a little earlier, um, probably than normal for us. So we've got to make sure we've got residuals in there to get us to canopy now, so that we don't have the escapes when it's too late and we can't do anything. Where your guys' situation, you can still do something, but if we wait much longer and don't get stuff on, then we can't do anything. So yeah, we're in a different situation, but still it's critical to pay attention and get the right rates and residuals in this post pass on both crops.
Yeah, good points. I think the moral of the story is, the bigger the gap there is between a pre-emergent residual and a post-emergence residual, just the longer window that you leave there naked, the worse things are going to be, obviously. So there's a reason why everybody talks about 28 or 30 days, because that's usually when you have to layer it on. Now, with Derek's
Um,
point, I'll say that I've seen some pretty impressive pre's laid down where guys use a pretty quality one and how long it's holding. Go ahead, Derek. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna, I guess, remind guys that it's okay to spray bare ground. Like we don't need to wait for weeds either. I do have some cases where, I mean, guys could go in and make some post apps right now in their crop, given the stage. Why not go lay on a residual right now? Yeah, we don't have to wait for weeds type deal.
Yeah, that's a good point. You also mentioned something earlier about, what to do when you ding things up, and I think that's another point I wanted to get into a little bit. So if you start getting the question, why did things not work? And then you start moving in, okay, what to do when it doesn't work. So what do I do next? So if I'm talking about water hemp with corn, and you guys are probably more experienced here, so you guys jump in, but we're talking about water hemp and corn. If the mesotrione didn't work or the HPPD on that first pass, I mean, there's with corn, as long as we're not limited by a height restriction, there is status or there's Diflex Duo or there's a form of dicamba that we can utilize. Keep in mind maximum growth stages, proper weather conditions, et cetera, for application. But there is that potential one out there. If you're power corn, list corn, there is the option of enlist too, based on height restriction, obviously that you'll have to follow. But and then just the third one, there's some hybrids, namely a lot of the Corteva genetics that have liberty tolerance. So that could be an option to help clean up too. But you want to be sure to verify that you got a liberty tolerant hybrid before you do that. I don't know if you guys want to make any mention on those points.
Yeah, I just say there's not a, you know, reminder to let those weeds recover. If you've already hit them once, let them start growing again. Don't rush back in. Usually that's at least going to be a week to 10 days, sometimes even 2 weeks, which by then our crop stage is getting so far along, we could be off label there. There's not a whole lot of things that are labeled in corn past 36-inch tall or V8 corn. And the few that are require drop nozzles and different things like that. So Nick mentioned the, safe and dicamba like a Diflex or a status being a really good option. But Nick, like you said earlier, there's a why it happened. There's so many reasons why we don't kill weeds. I wouldn't always jump to resistance type deal, but make sure those weeds that didn't die, you let them get back going a little bit, or they're not going to take up your second pass when you try to clean them up.
Also
Yeah,
remember, guys, Anytime you're putting a dicamba type product on a fast growing corn crop, you enhance that corn's going to be brittle. And then when you enhance that with a dicamba type product, you got a few day window there that if we get a wind event or just anything, the corn might get what we call a little loopy. So just caution that when you're doing those type of situations, you stand a little risk of making the corn a little more susceptible to breaking or things of such. But once it gets out of that stage, you're fine. But just a caution when we have high temps like this and the corn's growing rapidly, and we put a growth regulator type product on there, you stand a risk of maybe some brittleness, more brittleness in the crop.
Yeah, something good to add, Rodney, for sure. On the soybean side of things, most soybean traits have got Liberty tolerance in there, and so Liberty is an option if you miss the weeds the first go around and miss the water hemp. It's one of the ones, Derek mentioned being able to let the weeds regrow, giving them 14 days or so to regrow. And he's right. That's what most all the data would say. I would say there's some data on Liberty, though, that says it's one of the ones, if you miss with Liberty the first time, that you can come back 7 to 10 days and hit it again. And there's a lot of data that says that works fairly well. If you miss it the first time with Liberty, but it's one of the few ones, it's more of a contact. So it's one of the few ones you can do that with. If most folks I work with are utilizing Enlist beans, so Enlist and Liberty, great post-emergence option for water hemp. Most guys are using that. If you're not, you should definitely be looking at it. And then on the Extend Flex side, I mean, there is the option of an improved dicamba product for over-the-top use, but however, just remember you've got lots of things that you have to follow: training, temperature, rate, VRAs, DRAs, buffers, endangered species, nozzles, no AMS, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of hoops that you have to watch there. I don't know if you guys want to add anything on the soybean piece.
Yeah, what I would say there, since I still got so many post passes to go on, I uh, I just caution guys that it's not probably not going to be that hard to induce a little bit of crop response on, and this isn't just for beans, for corn and beans. Sure, we're starting to get some heat now, but our leaf cuticles, the plants haven't hardened off yet. And given our weed situations out there, we need to still remain pretty aggressive. In my opinion, on those mixes. But with the enlist traits, extend traits, and liberty traits, and all that, now we don't use near as many burners or bronzers or diphenyl ether herbicides like we used to, like the cadets and cobras and blazers and all those that used to go over the top and bronze our beans. And so we're not used to speckling up and bronzing beans and things like we used to. And so I would just tell guys not to panic, because I think our lush conditions, because we got plenty of moisture in the soil and they haven't had a chance to harden off yet, we might speckle up some stuff. But I always tell my guys good weed controls right on the edge of crop response, right? So I would still stay aggressive with our tank mixes on the post side, but just don't panic if you get a little bit of speckling or burning.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in our my area, the focus is on post and corn right now, but we planted a lot of beans early, and a lot of beans went in ahead of corn. So, especially with narrow rows, we have a lot of 15-inch beans, and so we tend to look past them, thinking we got to get the corn, but don't forget we need to get the second pass on this bean crop also. And to Derek's point, we probably, with the heat and the lushness and the thin cuticle, we will have some crop response. And so just it's emotional. None of us want to see our good lush green crop change color, but it's very short lived, and it will come right out of it. So Derek made a great point. We're right on the edge of crop response to have good weed control. So in my territory, we need to not look past the bean crop too to get that second pass on, so we don't have weeds breaking on us.
Yeah, good points, guys. I guess just one last thing I'll add, and I guess this is specific to me. Well, Johnson grass wouldn't be with Derek too, but one concerning thing to me has just been the lack of control I've seen in some fall panicum in some cornfields recently, and glyphosate is about the only option you have unless you got power corn, list corn, which has got FOP tolerance to it, which will give you another option. So the only thing I would say is we've known there's been some building tolerance in fall panicum to glyphosate for a few years now, but yeah, it just seems like I'm seeing more and more of it this year. And I would just say utilize sound rates of glyphosate in corn. Obviously, if you don't have power corn list, you can't do anything else. So just use sound rates. Be sure you utilize an AMS with it and a solid enough amount of AMS. I know there's some data in the South on some hard to control grasses where they've shown just glyphosate and AMS alone, when they take out all the other tank mix partners, has got better activity too. But hopefully, we don't get in a situation like that. Um, I'd also just mention, when it comes to Johnson grass, that's another one too. Derek, I know you fight that harder with the glyphosate resistant Johnson grass up there, but I'm hoping. Seems like we're building more and more tolerance down this way, and I'm hoping we're not on our way there. But man, it sure looks like it.
Yeah, I mean the Johnson grass here. I mean, I hate to say it, but if you have it out in your field here this year, we can suppress it probably at best, knock it back type deal, but hopefully knock it back enough that we can canopy over it type thing. But I just encourage anyone that has Johnson grass concerns, and it continues. Yeah, it's getting a really big topic or becoming one of the primary weeds in some of my territory. And we got to have a fall plan for that. I know that doesn't help us out today, and I'm not saying we still can't knock it back with our clethodim type products and things like that. But and like in corn, you might have some group two options that might suppress it a little bit. But to completely take it out, that grass is a perennial, survives off its root system. Perennials are best controlled in the fall, and so be thinking ahead if you got Johnson grass issues. Now, if we're talking specific weeds, and one thing that I've been seeing here over the last 2 weeks out looking at fields is don't forget about the volunteer corn. I know we have it every year and we think it's easy to sometimes take out, but every year we get to August and the field's spotless except for a bunch of volunteer corn. And I've had guys already having to spray. The volunteer corn is coming on strong. Make sure you have your group one in there, your clethodim, your fusilade, whatever it may be, taking your volunteer corn out because it is just as much as a weed as water hemp is. And in some cases, even worse. I saw one yesterday where I didn't know if it was a volunteer cornfield or a soybean field, but he had taken it all out type deal. It's a good time to be killing volunteer corn. So don't forget about that one, but I think we do sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Johnson grass, you're spot on. I mean, the best time to control that's in the fall. It's usually we can burn the tops off this time of year with glyphosate, but that doesn't appear to be happening on a wide scale like it used to. So, yeah, you're right. You got to focus on it in the fall when it takes it down the root system. Just real quick on metabolizing herbicides, I just going to mention, Derek mentioned they can be hard on the crop, and good weed control might be on the edge of crop injury, like you said, but there are some products you can utilize to help metabolize that herbicide. I mean, we've got several biostimulants. You might try Axis Insight, some seaweed kelp extracts, some PGRs, and then foliar nutritional products like we've got a Hypex product, or Backspin X, which have amino acids in there that can help that plant metabolize that herbicide, that crop metabolize it, so you reduce some of that crop injury. But yeah, just wanted to mention that. Don't need to go in depth on it. Lastly, we just got a few more minutes left, but I guess lastly is kind of flipping or turning towards that top dress, side dress application in corn. We talked about it a little bit last time. I thought it might be good to hit on a little bit more this time. Just that early corn, my geography, V6, V7, maybe a little bit past that, growing points above ground now. We have determined rows round, or are currently determining the number of rows round on that ear. So it's a really important stage. And we're just about to hit that maximum nitrogen uptake curve. When we hit V8, it just ramps up. And so we need to have some nitrogen there. Now's a good time for top dressing. I mentioned last time, most studies have shown that V6 side dress application can yield the same as waiting until later. So in my opinion, it's a good time to get it on and go ahead and have it there. I will say too on the stabilizer piece, and then I think I'll kick it over to you guys. But Nitrogen stabilizers get talked about a lot this time of year. I'll just say, there's stabilizers is somewhat of a broad term. There's some more specific terms inside of that, like a urease inhibitor, which most people would know as agrotane. If you're using urea or some form of urea, you're going to want a urease inhibitor there if you're broadcasting on top of the ground. It's going to block or reduce that urease enzyme to keep that urea from volatilizing, just turning into straight ammonia and going out to the atmosphere. That's why we put that on there. That might buy you 14 days, depending on what kind of data you look at while waiting on a rain. But so you need, if you're top dressing urea, it's going to lay on top of the ground. You definitely need a urease inhibitor. And then there's talk of nitrification inhibitors, and those products work a little bit different because once the product is in an ammonium form, which is stable in the soil, once it gets there, a nitrification inhibitor just tries to protect it in that form longer. Because once it converts to nitrate, then it's losable either through denitrification if your soil stays really wet, or through bleaching if you got more of a sandy soil where it moves down. So just wanted to mention that quickly because there is a lot of talk of stabilizers this time of year. So, and if you're utilizing something like Super U that's coated urea, that would have both on it. But I don't know if you guys want to mention something on this top dress pass.
I guess for my territory, I would just say we are there for that pass. I like what you said, Nick, about going a little bit earlier, and the data is going to show that you can get the same amount of benefit or just as good as waiting a little bit longer. That's another one I would just start to be proactive on so we don't get behind. Similar to weed control, I know that after that V8 timing, and then specifically after V10, our sulfur, nitrogen, potassium, that's when the corn is going to start demanding the most of those nutrients per day. A half pound of sulfur per day, 4 pounds of potassium a day type deal. And so making sure you have it in place early enough that it gets incorporated into the soil type deal is going to be particularly important. But you mentioned the stabilizer is going to be important, but also don't forget the sulfur in that pass. Not only does the plant and both corn and soybeans require a good amount of sulfur, but that sulfur is also going to make your nitrogen more efficient, and some of the other nutrients as well. And so those kind of go hand in hand along with that stabilizer as well. But yeah, that'd be my message: is we are at top dress timing, and I wouldn't wait any longer to start putting it on some of this crop.
Yeah, so in our geography, we've got some corn and the guys that do side dress nitrogen. A lot of our nitrogen goes on a little later in the crop with aerial urea, Midas type product. So, the with the status of pricing right now with the sulfurs and the anhydrous, we'll have our normal side dressers, but I think we'll have more aerial applied later in the crop at that V10 stage than we will adding any top dress at this point.
I'd also say, just to reiterate Derek's point, sulfur we know is one that's, I think a lot of people have caught on with, is very synergistic with nitrogen. We need a lot of sulfur. I'll just say I've been seeing a fair amount of sulfur deficiency where guys have not been utilizing any sulfur. And in a wet spring like this, you're typically are going to see it. So definitely be a good one to add. I mentioned last time boron. I think that's a good one to add as well. Just boron's very mobile in the soil. We tend to be really short of it, at least in my geography. So it's an easy one to add to it. And then just lastly, I'm the one that's still planting, still got corn getting planted, and we had a lot of fall applied gas. So just important for my guys to remember that if you still haven't planted your corn, or if you replanted your corn, you applied anhydrous in the fall, probably going to be a really good candidate for a top dress application, because you just left a really wide window before you had a crop uptake from when you applied that nitrogen. So just something to be mindful of. With that said, guys, I don't know if you have any other last parting points that you want to hit on.
No, I guess I'll swing back to the beginning. We're at critical stages to make sure we get the weeds out of there. After V4, weeds start shaving off yield in corn, and after about V2 in beans. And so get the weeds taken care of, and then consider the top dress timing. We had I had a lot of areas that had historical rainfall. And so our leachable nutrients, like you said, boron, sulfur, nitrogen, you can assume that those are going to be depleted come mid-season if we don't come back in with something.
Yeah, Derek, what did you say? It was the fourth wettest
April.
April in Kansas City?
Yeah, in just north of Kansas City with 7.5 inches. But then out of this storm, I had areas like that Trenton area that recorded south of Bethany about 9.1 inches of rain. And I don't know if I had anywhere that had less than 4.
Yeah, that's a lot of rainfall. After you told me that about KC, I went and looked at the Columbia weather, and it looks like April went down as the 8th wettest since 1890 in Columbia. So not quite as wet as you guys, but still pretty wet.
Yep.
Rodney, any last things from you?
No, I will say, my guys listening are probably saying we would take some of that water right now. We had been wet, and now with 85 and 90 degrees and low humidity, we're sucking our moisture. So we could take some of your water, but no, just keep hammer down on post spraying and keep ahead of this thing.
Well, guys, appreciate your time. Thanks for listening. We look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.